This episode is brought to you by Logify. Logify is your all-in-one platform for managing and scaling your short-term rental business. From easily publishing your own bookable website to managing all your day-to-day tasks just in one place. Whether you're a seasoned host or starting out, Logify can simplify your journey to building your thriving vacation rental business. And with Logify, you can accept direct bookings and payments, sync your reservations across all major booking sites, and automate your workflows, helping you save time while increasing your revenue. It's the smart way to grow your business, keep your guests satisfied, and enjoy what you do. So get started today and make sure you use the code VRF10, that's VRF10, for 10% off your professional and ultimate yearly plans when signing up.
In this episode, we're joined by Dr. Yoram Solomon, an innovator and thought leader renowned for his work on trust and innovation. Recognised globally, Dr. Solomon is the author of 19 books. He's been named one of the top thinkers on culture by Thinkers 360, and he's been a trusted advisor for numerous Fortune 500 companies. He also teaches entrepreneurship at Southern Methodist University and has a rich background in technology, law and business management. Join us as we dive into the importance of trust in all of our relationships. This is the Vacation Rental Success Podcast, keeping you up to date with news, views, information and resources on this rapidly changing short-term rental business. I'm your host, Heather Bayer, and with 25 years of experience in this industry, I'm making sure you know what's hot, what's not, what's new, and what will help make your business a success. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Vacation Rental Success Podcast. This is your host, Heather Bayer, and as ever, I'm super happy to be back with you once again. And today we're talking about trust. I spoke about this in a presentation at the CanStays Rental Alliance conference in Banff a few weeks ago, and I shared some information on trust and neuroscience and how our brains react to different trust signals in a website. But there's so much more to it than that. And trust underpins everything we do. It's in our relationships with guests, with owners, with the community in which we operate and the teams with whom we work. And trust is just a core value and a principle that helps us be successful. So I'm honoured today to have a global expert in trust with me. Dr. Yoram Solomon has published 19 books. He has 22 patents and was one of the creators of Wi-Fi and USB 3 technologies. I have to share with you that while I was in Banff a couple of weeks ago, my son and business partner Mike and I were sharing a condo, and we got back to the condo in the evening, and I said, Mike, I'm interviewing Yoram Solomon this week. And I said, but I can't remember what the topic is. It's one of those senior moments, I think. And Mike said, that's no problem. We'll look him up on Google. And a couple of minutes later, Mike said, Mum, seriously, in fact, I cannot repeat what he said. It was holy something. And he said, Mum, do you know who you're interviewing? He said, Dr. Solomon was one of the creators of the expression Wi-Fi and USB 3 technologies. And I'm going, oh, that's important, is it? I found Dr. Solomon when I was researching trust for the presentation I did. And I had no idea of Dr. Solomon's previous work with Texas Instruments. It really is quite absorbing, and I left Mike to do the research on it. But I am so happy to be able to introduce you to Dr. Solomon, and he's going to share some of that wisdom that he has on the world of trust. So without further ado, let's go on over to the interview with Yoram Solomon. I am so delighted to have with me today Dr. Yoram Solomon, who is, I think, the world expert on trust.
I wouldn't go that far, but an expert on trust.
Say global expert on trust.
Let's say this, somebody who's committed to trust. And
That
for those of you who could not see and only listen, I just showed my hand tattoo that says trust. That's the only tattoo I have on my body.
and a very worthy tattoo it is as well. You must have a picture of that you can send to us.
I actually don't. I'll take a picture. I never
Just
took
take a
a
selfie.
professional picture of my trust tattoo.
Just take a selfie, and
Yeah,
then that will be fine. Dr. Yoram, can I just call you Yoram?
Yoram.
Is that fine, Yoram?
Yes.
Thank you. I've been researching a lot. I've looked at all your TED Talks and listened to a lot of podcasts. You have done a lot. Your career's spanned all sorts of different things. You've got technologies, education, organizational management. What got you into the world of trust?
It's kind of a fun story because I was working on my PhD dissertation, and I was on the phone with my mentor and trying to come up with the topic for my dissertation. Now, if you ever do a PhD or anybody who's doing a PhD, you will know that one of the things they tell you about the dissertation is that a good dissertation is a done dissertation, because most people will never finish it because you're on your own, you have your own schedule. And so I'm trying to come up with simple topics. My mentor is trying to push me to come up with something bigger and better. And at some point, I came up with the topic. You already mentioned that I started with engineering and a lot of technology in my background. And I was always involved with innovation. I have patents that I issued. I have, at some point when I worked in Texas Instruments, they even created a brochure with my picture called it TI's Greatest Innovator. And so innovation was always my thing. And what I realized is I worked in a lot of small startup companies. I worked in a lot of large companies, not a lot, but a few large companies. And I could feel differences in the level of creativity. And so my question was, why is the level of creativity, why are people so much more creative when they work in small startup companies than when they work in large mature companies? This ended up being the topic of my dissertation, and as it turns out, the rest of my life, professional career. And it came down to what I define as a culture of innovation. And as I kept on researching culture of innovation, what I found was that it's not only innovation, it's productivity, it's creativity, it's a lot of things in the organization that are really at the, you don't start with innovation. That's the second floor of a building. The first floor is the culture, and the foundation is trust. And that's what I found. I found that trust was the foundation, and I started researching trust. I started doing some initial research. After some initial research, I realized that I'm in a junction, and I asked myself, I actually, not just myself, I asked 20 of my closest friends and family members, what do you think I should do? Should I stick with innovation or switch to trust? 19 out of 20 said stick with innovation. So I switched to trust.
Trust. Yeah, I like the way you move with that. You've said in some of your TED Talks and your podcasts that you look at trust differently.
Yes.
Can you explain what that is? Because over the past 6 months, it's just in the past 6 months that I've really got into considering that trust is really it's one of the pillars, it is the pillar of our vacation rental industry. And I've done a lot of reading and talking to people in this business who focus on trust. But then I hear you say we're not perhaps looking at it the right way. So can you explain that?
No. Okay, yes, I will. To me, embarking on the topic of trust, I did what you're probably doing now, and that's read everything that there is to read about trust, whether it was Stephen M.R. Covey's 2006 book, The Speed of Trust, and Horsager and others. So I started reading a lot about trust and reading articles, and then I paused and I asked myself, how do I see trust? So I read a lot of research articles, not just popular reading, but research articles. How do they define trust? And then I asked myself, I looked in the mirror and I asked, am I looking at it the same way? Because if I'm looking at it the same way, I really don't want to be that person that says what everybody else said before him. And I realized that there are several ways in which I look at it differently. One of them is that trust is relative. That's one of the biggest ones. Trust is relative. Up until now, everything you're going to read about trust will give you a list of qualities. Horsager has these 8 pillars, and Covey has these 4 main qualities. And the thing is, the way they look at it is, here is a list, here is a checklist. If you can check every box as good in that list, you're going to be trusted. If you don't check all of them as good, or the fewer that you check as good, you're not going to be trusted. And the thing is, that's good if you assume that everything is absolute and universal. Now, telling the truth is absolute and universal. You're not going to trust somebody who knowingly and intentionally lies to you. But how about risk taking? How about being a risk taker? Is that a quality that would make you trusted or not trusted? And the answer is, it depends on who you're asking. Because the same behavior, and that's one of my biggest beliefs, the same behavior that would cause one person to trust me would cause another person to distrust me. So if you don't mind, I'll apply it to your industry, the short-term rental industry, and tell you that not all customers are the same. And what you do could get you the trust of some of them and not others. Another way where I look at it differently is that trust is really not only dependent on your trustworthiness. So we like to think that if I'm trustworthy, then everybody's going to trust me. We already know that it's relative, but even without it, the level of trust that one person has in another, let's talk about your client, has in you, is the product of your trustworthiness, no doubt about that, and their trustfulness, their willingness to trust people. And whenever I give keynotes or workshops, I give several examples of, we are the sum of our experiences. And you may decide that I don't trust people from Texas. Why? I got exposed to a few people from Texas. I had bad experiences with them. I don't trust them. I, for example, has exactly the opposite opinion on people from Canada. I think Canadians are the nicest people ever. Whenever I think about a Canadian, your starting point in trust for me is already higher than, especially people from New York. But so there is that part of trustfulness. The last thing where I differentiated myself, there are more, but the last big thing where I differentiated myself is by saying, it's not enough if I tell you what, in your specific situation, in a specific relationship, what you have to do to be more trusted there. Knowledge is not enough. And what I did was, and this especially goes in my workshops and masterclass, not so much in when I give a keynote, it's what I call trust habits. And it's a process that I developed that helps people form new habits that change all behaviors and build trust. So it's the actionable part of trust, and not just, I'll tell you what you're doing, I'll tell you what you're doing wrong, and that's it, you go figure it out.
So let me give you a situation here. It's something that everybody in our industry, certainly those who are acting in a very professional manner, are struggling with. And that is the might and the power of Airbnb. Airbnb came along in 2007. By 2014, it was a powerful force in the market. And they have spent billions on getting guests to trust them with going to a stranger's house by virtue of simply putting a listing on a website. But the way they have versed it, it is, you can trust us because we have safety guarantees and we have other trust signals that tell you're going to be okay. So when a host or a property manager decides that they don't want to use Airbnb, they want to go it alone, create their own website, this is where the big challenge is. Because how do they get these same people who are reading the Airbnb trust signals to come to their website and to trust them when Airbnb is saying, don't trust those little people because we've been doing this for a long time. I've actually been in this industry for 28 years now, long before Airbnb. And people were way more trusting back then. They would book a property from a tiny little classified ad. But now it's a different process. So can you give me some help on how these property managers and hosts can make themselves more trustworthy?
Definitely. So, one thing that I didn't mention is that over the years, I have observed 8 laws of trust. Now, I didn't make them up, I didn't invent them, I didn't create them. I just observed them and reported them. And I reported them in the Book of Trust and a few others after that. And I'll touch on trust law number 5. Trust is transferable. And I typically I start with an example, typically from a slightly different industry, but relatively close to yours. And I ask people, when you were young, did your parents tell you to never get into a car with a stranger? And obviously you were, and everybody were told by their parents, never go into a car with a stranger. Probably not in Canada. In Canada, you can because they're all nice there. But you never enter a car with a stranger. And then I asked the audience, did you get this advice when you were kids? Yes. And do you go into a car with a stranger? And before you answer, I put a logo of Uber. So they go into a car with a stranger. My podcast, The Trust Show, is in its 13th season. The first episode of this season, I would encourage everybody listening to us right now to listen to that one, episode 1 of season 13, because it is about transferable trust. So, what do I mean by transferable trust? Why do we trust Uber? Let me switch back to your industry. Why do we trust Airbnb? We trust Airbnb because they're big. We trust them because one thing that they do is they brainwash us. They have the money to look, you have a small company that has some rental properties. Can you afford a Super Bowl ad? And the answer is no, but Airbnb can. So there is an element of brainwashing, but there's also an element of quantity versus quality. Because when you go there, tell me that you're not looking at the reviews. Of course you are. And you got a lot of reviews. And those are people that you don't know. So you, the renter, you don't know those people who rented before you, but there are many of them, and there are many 5-star reviews. So you trust people that you don't know. And basically, you don't trust them very much, but there are many of them. There's 500 reviews. So you trust the fact that 500 people cannot be lying to you. You also do trust Airbnb as a company. And you say, if they said this is a good rental place, then I trust them. But there's an alternative to that. The alternative to that is quality. And that is, if you look at me as a speaker, I'm not on this Airbnb type thing where there are hundreds and thousands of reviews of everybody who ever attended one of my keynotes, because there are probably hundreds of thousands of people that heard me speak in a keynote, but they don't all put reviews in whatever website and people will hire me based on that. They hire me based on quality of a much smaller number of people. So I think where it goes to your industry, to the short-term rentals, this is where you go through a lot more of word of mouth. How do I use the word of mouth to get from one customer to another customer? This is how people reach me, by the way. So I'm going to combine a couple of things. One of them is the more personal reviews, so more on referrals rather than anonymous, never heard of them before type of reviews, which is again why I would recommend going to that first episode. But the other thing is, what is on your website? See, I trust you based on, and I built this model of trust, and I trust you based on 6 components. 3 of them are who you are, 3 of them are what you do. The who you are, they're made of competence, personality, compatibility, and symmetry. Symmetry is more of a situational thing. You are who you are, they are who they are. Competence and personality compatibility are things that you can convey through your website. Now, the last thing that I would tell you to put on your website is trusted by, we're past that. We're past it. Everybody uses this. We're the most trusted. Says who? Who said that you're trusted? You can instead put indicators to why I should trust you. So this is before I ever get exposed to you. The second part is what happens after I got exposed to you. The positivity, the time, and the intimacy. So, for example, whenever somebody reaches out to me to either hiring me to do a keynote, what I tell them is, let's have a Zoom call. I just need to know your price. Let's have a Zoom call. Let me first know what is it that you're looking for. Once we have the Zoom call, and I'm sure that you can feel right now how passionate I am about trust. And if I started throwing numbers from all of the research that I've done, I will add a lot more to my credibility. There are really two things that I'm doing here. It's one of them is no BS. You don't get BS. When I say, trust me, I'm trusted, that's BS, and everybody knows that. Don't use it. Empathy. Big thing is empathy. And empathy is not compassion, it's not pity, it's not sympathy. Empathy is your ability to see things from the other person's perspective as if you were them, not you. And it's your ability to really read and understand the person who's hiring you, or not hiring you, in this case, renting from you, see things from their perspective and speak their language. What I'm doing right now is empathy, because I've been doing some research before I came in to this show to know your podcast, to know your audience, to know what they care about. I'm not making stuff up for them, but I'm focusing on what they care about, your audience, rather than generic things. And then there is the time and intimacy. The more time you spend with someone, the more you trust them, the more intimate. And that's why I said have a Zoom call rather than exchange emails. You get that too. One little thing that I would tell you, or you know what, two things that I would give you as real advice along the lines of this model. One of them is put videos on the website, but don't put videos of the properties. We all know how videos of the properties are taken. By the way, one important thing, and that is there's the trust before the transaction, the trust after the transaction. Trust before the transaction, it's really the trust that I'm getting more value than the value that I attribute to the amount of money that I need to pay you. The trust after the transaction was the value not less than what I got, than what I thought I was getting when I signed up? Was the price not higher than so was the value not lower? Was the price not higher than what I thought I was paying? Put some great shots of the property, and then I go into the property and doesn't look anything like the pictures of the video. Guess what the probability is that you keep me as a customer? By the way, guess what the probability is that I give good review? How would you like to have this review? The property doesn't look anything like what was advertised. So I'll give you a few possible reviews. One of them is property was dirty, was not maintained, looked so great on the website, looks, I don't know what, when I visited. How would you like that review? How would you like a review that says the property was pretty much like I saw on the video? How would you like the review? The video doesn't do justice to how good this property is. Those are very powerful testimonials, by the way. So videos, but not videos necessarily of the property itself, but videos of people, videos of the people who run the property, videos of actual customers being happy. That is that component of intimacy, and that just increases trustworthiness. Even though you're small, you're not Airbnb. That was a long answer.
That was a great answer.
And that's all the time we have.
It sparked up all sorts of questions, so you just hang around.
Okay.
I'm going to take a short break just now to hear about our sponsor. We're going to be right back with more from this great interview in just a few moments. So once again, I'm welcoming Dennis Klett from Logify. Dennis, great to have you back. How does Logify facilitate guest communication and experience? Because that's so important to hosts these days.
It is. We facilitate this using what we call our unified inbox. So that's essentially a place where all guest communication, no matter whether it's comes from your website, Airbnb, Vrbo, or Booking.com, they all enter this unified inbox in Logify, which eliminates the needs to jump between multiple booking platforms to communicate with your guests. The second thing would be what we call scheduled autoresponders, which is a thing you can set up using email templates. And you can then say, send these emails whenever a certain trigger appears. For example, if a guest makes a booking, we would automatically send a specific email that you have set up, or when a guest makes a payment, or when, let's say, a guest arrives 5 days before arriving or 3 days after departing. That's a great way to automate your messages. And then the last thing we just recently launched is the AI assistant. It's a tool that actually generates responses for you. So it understands the question that the guest is asking you. We feed the AI with information about your short-term rental, property details. It understands the context of the booking, and then it drafts a response that you can still review and edit if you want. And that's a real time saver. And the early adopters are super happy and are power users of that. And we also just introduced a feature when you still opt to respond manually yourself. You can also click the AI assistant and it would just improve what you just have written. So you can just quickly respond in bullet point form, but then the AI would actually convert this into a real response.
That sounds great, Dennis. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned earlier on about indicators on a website. Maybe that's what I've been calling trust signals. And videos, for sure, are one of them. And I've seen sites where there's video feedback from guests, and they are making the video while they're still at the property. I'm here, we're having the greatest time. That, to me, transcends the few lines of text. Way transcends that. But what other indicators should we have on a website? I was doing a presentation at a conference just recently when I was talking about websites and saying what my particular bugbear is seeing all the things on the footer of a website. You've got your associations that you belong to and maybe somewhere that you've been featured. And then you go click on them and it takes you outside the site to somewhere completely different. Or you click on it, it doesn't go anywhere at all. I'm interested in hearing from you. Are these useful at all? Should we do anything else with them?
I think that it's really a matter of, do your customers, again, this goes back to empathy. Do your customers consider those important? Do your customers even know what they are? Sometimes they don't even know what they are, but they still are like, oh, this is cool. I've been a member of the National Speakers Association for the last, 7 or 8 years. I have never had someone ask me, wait, before we hire you, are you a member of the National Speakers Association? Because otherwise we're not going to hire you. No, nobody asked me that. So I'm not saying you should not do that, but you have to give that the right proportion from the perspective of the person. This entire website is for what? To make you feel good, to make you look good? No, it's to get customers. It's that simple. It's to get customers. And so what are the kind of signals? First of all, are you considering the customer when you design the website? Is the website designed for a customer? One thing that I'm not sure if you mentioned that in the introduction, I'm also a professor of entrepreneurship. And one of the things I tell my students is one of the main reasons I'm going to take points off any assignment you're going to write is your use of subjective adjectives. What does this mean? We have a world-class team. Says who? Mm-hmm. How about you let me decide that you have a world-class team? Our CEO is the former XYZ. Who? Now I think that you have a world-class team. But saying that you have a world-class team, saying that we are trusted, says who? If you can get a video of a customer that says, I trust them, I would go there again in a heartbeat. I would only hire something. There are companies that I buy from that I would only buy from them. There are alternatives, but I would only buy from them. That's the kind of testimonial that you want to put there. One of the best testimonials that I got after a keynote was one of the questions that the organizers asked. This is an association, and one of the questions they asked they asked questions about my own session and my delivery and how valuable was the content and so on. But then they asked general questions about the entire event, and they asked, what other topics should we bring in the future, in future conferences? And I got one person wrote, I don't care as long as you can bring Yoram back to speak. That's what you want to put. Those are the type of testimonials that you want to put there. When I read that, I go, you know what? That's who I want to rent from. And again, you have, especially today, you have to always consider there is what happens before we buy, there's what happens after we buy. So, subjective adjectives, take them out. Do not talk about how good you are. Let others talk about how good you are. Provide evidence to how good you are. The biggest thing here is really that is there a way for you to create a network where you would actually know that somebody you know had visited there? And the technology is there to do that. Just think about LinkedIn and Facebook, right? So if I'm on LinkedIn or Facebook and I get a request from you, Heather, you want to join me, what's the first thing that I look for? How many people do we have in common? Mm-hmm. So is there a way for you to use the same technology? And when somebody goes to your website, you already have this little bar at the bottom that says accept cookies. So you're going to put a cookie there. And when somebody goes up there, you're going to tell them, oh, by the way, these of your friends have visited or rented from us. Bam. This is way better than 1,000 reviews on Airbnb.
Yeah, you got me there, because that's what I do on LinkedIn. You say, oh, 123 connections. Oh, yeah, click. Really, without even looking to see what their resume is. And it's just, oh, we have the same connections. Therefore, I'm trusting you to add you to my network.
And then again, it's I have more than 8,000 followers on LinkedIn. Doesn't matter because you don't know them. 22 of them. And when you see these names, you go, these are people I trust, therefore I trust this website. So that would be one thing. That would be a very powerful thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to shift a little bit to look at a different type. We've been talking about guests. For property managers, their other client are their owners. People who own properties will go to the property management companies and say, here's my $2 million property. Take it, rent it. Doesn't quite happen like that. There's a lot of trust involved. Looking at your T-shirt where it says trust premium, sell on trust, not price. And yes. I was listening to a podcast this morning where I was hearing you talking about trust preferences and trust premium. And I thought this really links in. You've got two property managers in the same location, both charging the same commission. So you know where I'm going with this. How does this work? How do you get to this selling on trust and not price and gaining new clients?
First of all, I'm glad that you noticed this on, by the way, it's a polo shirt. Maybe in Canada, they call all of them T-shirts, but here in the US, we call these polo shirts. But anyway, this, by the way, is a perfect example. And I have to give you another story. I have to answer a question you didn't ask, even though you asked a very specific question. These shirts, and I'm not just kidding, this firm is called Queensboro, and they make custom shirts. I used to get my custom shirts elsewhere, and I switched to Queensboro. Why did I switch to Queensboro? First, it was price. Really, it was smaller quantity, smaller minimum quantity. It was better price. I could have 6 shirts. Each one of them will have a different logo. The others didn't offer that. That was why I chose them at the first time. So one time, I think I have 40 shirts from them and other apparels. And one day, I ordered a couple of shirts. And again, it's over their website. The shirts arrived. They were not what I thought they would be. So the fabric was not what I thought it was. The color was not exactly what I thought it was. Now, here's the thing. They sent me what I ordered. They sent me exactly what I ordered. Nothing more, nothing less. I went back to the website. I looked more carefully, and I'm like, that was my fault. That was on me. But I get an email from them. How was your order? And they only give you 2 options to check. Perfect, not perfect. What do I write? It's not perfect because that's not what I thought I was ordering. And so I wrote not perfect. Didn't take an hour before I get a call. What was wrong with the order? I said, first of all, it's not your fault. So don't worry about it. It's not your fault, my fault. What I thought was different fabric, slightly different color. When I got it, I went and I looked, and you sent me what I ordered. There's no doubt. It's just that what I thought I was ordering was different. So don't worry, it's not your fault. And she goes, we're going to refund you. I said, no, don't refund me. That's not your fault. She said, but it's not perfect. I said, you only gave me two options, perfect or not perfect. It's not perfect, but it's not your fault. You should not be refunding me. She said, no, we're going to refund you. I find myself in this absurd argument with them over whether I get a refund or not get a refund. And I'm the one saying, don't send a refund. And she just wouldn't listen, and I get a refund. Keep the shirts and you get a refund. You know what, Heather? I have never went to anybody else. I will always stay with them. That's the whole point of after the fact. But before, why did I choose them? Price. So take two providers, take two property managers, okay? You don't know any of them. Which one will you choose? We already know that there is a trust component, and if you look at their websites, maybe it's going to give you some hints on to who you should choose better than the other. Now, I have not done research on property managers. I've done research on other types, and I'll give you financial advisors, for example. That's the closest example that comes to mind. I did it for financial advisors, and I said there are two financial advisors you're considering. One, you just don't know. It's not that you don't trust them. It's not that you distrust them, that you actively distrust them. It's not that they've done anything to lose your trust, to betray you. No, you just don't know them. And then the other one is someone that you trust. Now, maybe this is just the who they are right now. You never communicated with them. Maybe you have communicated with them, but bottom line is you trust them more than the first one. The first component you mentioned was trust preference. What's the preference that I'm going to choose this one over the other one? 98.2%. Same price, everything else being equal, 98.2% I'm going to choose the one that I trust more. 98.2%. Now, what if they started raising their prices? So if you think about property managers, their fees that they're taking, right? What if the fees that one is taking is higher than the fee that the other is asking for? With financial advisors, people were willing to pay 39.4% higher price. That's what I call the trust premium. That 39.4% gets you to being an equal footing with somebody they don't know. So if I'm a property manager that you trust, you would be willing to pay, this number is true for financial advisors, but could be 40% higher fees over someone that they don't know.
This goes back to the whole Airbnb thing, because we often, as property managers, we put across to potential guests, we say we're saving you the booking fee, because Airbnb charges an additional fee on top of the rental rate to the guest. And I often hear people say, I don't understand it. I don't understand why they don't come through me when they would save that booking fee, which can be up to about 13% of that rental rate, but still people will go back to them because of that higher price. And that's that trust premium, right?
Yeah. And it goes back to when you go on Amazon and you want to order something, and there are two things that look very similar. One of them has, and they both have the same level of reviews. It's 4.6. Both of them are 4.6. One of them has 51,000 reviews at an average of 4.6. The other has 12 reviews at an average of 4.6. You're going to go with the 51,000. That's something that Airbnb has. For people who care about the quantity of the reviews, you're not going to be able to compete on that. But you know what? That's okay. Know who you're not trying to compete over. Those are, by the way, the people that would only buy from you if you have a Super Bowl ad. They would only buy from you if you're a billion-dollar company. These are not the ones that you're after. And that is, again, this is critical. And this is something that I teach in my entrepreneurship classes at SMU, that you have to define who is the customer that will appreciate what you do over what others do. When my daughters went to college, my first daughter, she said, I want a small college where I'm going to feel more, it's going to be more intimate. I'm going to know all the professors are going to know me. My second daughter said, nope, I want a big college. I don't care about knowing anybody. Those are two different customers. Know upfront that the customers who care about the number of reviews and the fact that the management company, call them that, has a Super Bowl ad are not your customers. So now the question is, who are the customers who say, I would rather rent from somebody smaller? Bottom line, what they're saying is your website on another screen. What is it that would make me say, I want to work with this management company? I have the property, the $2 million property. I want to work with this company and not with Airbnb. I'm going to get lost with Airbnb, and I have a good feeling about this other company.
Yeah, so sticking with the owners, you talked about video, and I've seen a few websites where there are videos of the owners sitting down in a nice environment and interviewing one of their owners. And the owner is just love. And we did this with my company. I had a property management company for 20 years. And we did this occasionally. We would bring in some of our owners and we'd give them some lunch, and then we would sit them down and interview them. And it was very powerful. And you talk about videos of guests, but it works with owners too. You've talked a lot about reviews. Reviews can be positive and negative. I heard from somebody recently, I think it was on a forum or a Facebook group, and somebody had said, I've got 500 5-star reviews, and then somebody gave me a 4-star, and that's completely ruined my record. And a lot of people were coming back and saying, it's really good to have some negative feedback because I don't trust somebody that just has 500 5-star reviews. What do you say about that?
No, you touched it. You hit the nail on the head. It's somebody that has 500, all of them are perfect. Then that's probably somebody that I don't trust. I don't trust the review wherever the reviews are. Where are the reviews? Are they on your website? Oh, let me guess. Everything under 5 you took off. Being a professor, there is a website called Rate My Professors. And I never heard of this website before until my daughters went to college. And then I went and I looked myself up and I found myself. And I have a lot of 5-star reviews. I have 1 4-star reviews. And I think I have 5 1-star review. I don't have 2. I don't have 3. What's the first thing that you do when you go on Amazon? I don't know what you do, but
look at the negative ones.
You look at the reviews, and which reviews do you look at? Do you look at the 5-star reviews? No. You look at the 1-star review. What are you looking for there? One, you're looking for what was it that they didn't like. I own a Jeep Wrangler. I love the Jeep Wrangler. This is the longest I ever held on to one car. But before I bought it, the first thing that I looked for was, what are the bad reviews of Jeep Wranglers? So somebody said, the ride is pretty rough. That's why you buy a Jeep Wrangler. You don't like that the ride is rough, buy a BMW. If you're short, then since the steering wheel is not telescopic, it's going to be hard for you to reach the pedals. I'm 6'1", not a problem of mine. You start with the 1-star reviews, but you do something else as well. You look at, did the company respond? How did they respond? Look, there are people that just give bad reviews. That's no matter what, they're going to give bad reviews. By the way, research shows that we are pretty much 3 times more likely to put a negative review if we had a negative experience than put a positive review if we had a positive experience. A friend of mine was hired. Eventually, he was a senior vice president at Intel. When he left the company we both worked for, he joined another company. I was the only review, the only reference that the CEO checked. And the reason I was the only reference is the CEO knew me. So there's your 5th law of trust. Trust is transferable. He knows me. He trusts me. But the second thing is, I did not BS him. I did not tell him things that person that you're considering is great and wonderful and there's nothing wrong with them. No, I told him what's wrong with him too. I told him what the downsides are. And that gave a good, big, round picture. If you have 500 5-star reviews and not a single 4-star review, it doesn't look credible. You want this to be in a more objective place, but those 1-star reviews or 2 or 3 or 4, how did you handle them? Can the customer see that you handle them? And you know what? This can be a rabbit hole with the customer. This customer is unhappy and they're going to keep on saying, but this, but that. But your response on, we've tried to do this, we have refunded you or whatever. Take Queensboro, the one that's doing my shirts. They refunded me. I told them not to refund me. They refunded me. Does that mean they're going to be losing money? Heck no. I'm a loyal customer for life. All they did was refund me once. But what you need is you need to know that they refunded me, because if that thing ends up in nobody hears about it, then it never happened. There is a statement that I say. I have my own video studio, and I sometimes take pictures of what the video studio looks like. Microphones coming from top and bottom, and wires and cameras and the green screen behind, and everything. And then you look at the video that comes out of it. I'm in one of the studios right now, and you can see how clean everything is. And what comes out of it, I didn't even need the microphone to be in the picture. And what I tell them is, you look at the video, and the video is so clean. You don't see everything that's all around me here. What happens 1 inch outside of the screen never happened. And that's something to always keep in mind. You got a 1-star review, you never responded to it publicly, you responded privately, you fixed the issue. What does a potential new customer see, or new property owner? What do they see? They see a 1-star review. They don't know how you handle it.
I think that's a perfect piece of advice. Just respond to everything.
As opposed to all
not,
the other pieces of advice.
Yes, but respond not defensively.
Yeah.
There are ways of responding. I have to come back to a couple of things. One is Queensborough. You know what people say, where were you when something happened? You mentioned Queensborough. I was walking my dog, and I know exactly the spot where I was walking my dog when I heard you tell that story about Queensborough, and it really stuck in my head. I'm a great proponent of storytelling, because storytelling like that, I trust people when I hear their stories. And yes, so we've mentioned that, and I thought, I remember where I was when I was walking the dog and listening to you talk about Queensborough. We're coming to an end of our chat now, which is a real shame because I've got loads more questions. But anyway, you talked about 8 laws of trust. You shared one of them with us. Where can people find out about the other laws of trust?
I would go with the Book of Trust. That's one of I have 19 books, so I have the Book of Trust. And it describes the 8 laws of trust and the 6 components of my relative trustworthiness model, and even the 7 steps of the trust habits process. The one thing I would suggest is don't get that book. Don't get the Book of Trust. It's 550 pages, close to 250,000 words. And so it's cruel and unusual punishment to read that book. So what I did was it's in the 3rd edition right now. It is a big book, but I created the mini book of trust. And the mini book of trust is a lot more digestible. It has 180 pages. It still covers everything, but at more of a practical standpoint, more of a, here is what it is. And what I tell people is start with that book. Start with the mini book of trust. And with the mini book of trust, if you get to a point where you say to yourself, you ask yourself, wait a minute, how did he reach that conclusion? I want another level of depth beyond this. Then get the Book of Trust and read how I got there. Read the research behind it. Read 1 or 2 layers in depth. But your starting point should really be the Book of Trust. I would give you one more, and that is I have a mini book series called Can I Trust You? And those are very specific habits for people in different positions. So there's one book for leaders and one for team members. There's a book for salespeople. There is a book for consultants, advisors, and coaches. And I think that between these two, the one for salespeople and the one for consultants, advisors, and coaches, I think that these two would be very complementary to the mini book of trust.
That's great. And links to all of those will be on the show notes.
And of course, you can listen to the Trust Show podcast, which is, for the most part, it's just me talking. That episode I mentioned before, the first episode of the 13th season, is actually an interview where I interview Bill Cates. He's one of the gurus in the area of referrals. So that's one you may want to hear. But in general, I just share a lot. And for those who ask me, why do you have, I have at this point about 200 hours of me talking on the Trust Show podcast. And I already told you about 250,000 words in the Book of Trust. When people ask me, why do you put so much there? It's simple. I don't know if I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning. I don't know that I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning. If I don't, I need to leave this behind. So everything I know is being put into either the podcast or the Book of Trust.
I'm an avid listener to the podcast now. I was listening to that episode with Gates, not Bill Gates, this morning.
Yes, not Gates.
Yeah, this morning. So I thoroughly recommend that you go listen to that. And since my audience trusts me implicitly,
The fifth law of trust.
I would imagine you're going to get a few more listeners. Yoram, Dr. Solomon, thank you so much for joining me.
Yoram is good.
Thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you for putting on your website, do you want me on your podcast? Because I've been following you and I saw that and I went click and you came back to me by return. And I really appreciate that. It's been such a pleasure.
You are welcome, and I enjoyed it too.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Yoram Solomon. It was an absolute pleasure speaking to Yoram and hearing his take on the topic of trust. I have to say that since we started really concentrating on trust in our business within our Thrive training system and through just about everything else I'm doing, I'm expanding and broadening my knowledge on trust. If you looked at one of my bookcases, you would see it's absolutely full now of different books on trust. And I will compile some of those and put a list out in a blog post. I must do a blog post shortly about trust and pull together some of these resources because there is so much out there. And I've really been enjoying taking it apart. I've really enjoyed researching this topic. It really is fascinating. So I hope you enjoyed that interview. I certainly did. I learned a lot. Going back, probably buying some more books. And we'll be doing more research, which ultimately I'll be bringing to you. Please let me know if you have a topic for the podcast that you would like me to cover. And if you are a property manager out there that has a really great story, please let me know. Please connect with me because I'd love to hear from you. And over the course of the next few months, I'm going to be spending a little bit more time talking in particular to property managers who have that unique story. So don't be shy. Send me an email. You will get a response from me, I promise. Okay, that's it for this week. I have very much enjoyed that conversation and enjoyed delivering it to you, and I'll look forward to be doing that again next time.
This episode was brought to you by Logify, an all-in-one solution that will help you start, manage, and grow your short-term rental business. Use code VRF10 and get started today at logify.com.
It's been a pleasure as ever being with you. If there's anything you'd like to comment on, then join the conversation on the show notes for the episode at vacationrentalformula.com. We'd love to hear from you, and I look forward to being with you again next week.